the panelists joining. We have today Jessica Janiuk, Senior Software Engineer at Google, Boamah at Ejara, and Noemi León from ATHENAWORKS.
Well, first of all, thanks for joining and thanks for the invite. It's great to be here with you, and I hope you enjoy this panel. I've been working as a software developer for about 10 years now. I'm not that old, but, or yes, maybe. I studied telematics engineering and started working as an intern in a local company that gave me that opportunity. And then I started like my career and focusing only on software development. I have 4 years experience now as a lead engineer. At the moment, I am working with my favorite technology, that is VueJS, and also Python. I think that the knowledge is the only good that grows the more it is shared. So I've been collaborating also with communities such as GDGs and as a Women Tech Makers Ambassador, and I am instructor at LinkedIn Learning, and that's all. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks, Noemi. Jessica.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Janiuk. I have been a software engineer for about 15 years, and I am that old, I guess. I didn't start my career in engineering. I'm mostly self-taught, and I never expected to be at Google, but I am at Google now. And I never expected to be working on the Angular framework, but I am working on the Angular framework now. So I'm an engineer on the Angular framework team. Before I was on that team, before I joined Google, I actually worked with React. I've worked with several other frameworks, including Angular and its precursor, AngularJS, and things that Angular took inspiration from, like Knockout, and like I'm sure we've all had experience with jQuery. I've done a lot of work with that too. So long history of front-end work. And yeah, I've enjoyed my time on the Angular framework team, and you've probably seen me on YouTube videos for Angular because I've gotten to do a few of those. So I'm excited to be here and be a part of this panel, and I really appreciate the invite. So looking forward to this.
Thanks for accepting. We're super excited on having you too. So let's get started with the questions. I want to start with the highlights. If you could say, what is the most remarkable feature of your framework, what will it be? And I'm going to start with Jessica in representation of Angular framework.
That's a great question. I think there's probably a few things. It's hard to pick one. I think one thing that is exciting and a huge aspect of Angular that is really great is that it's like continuing to evolve and continuing to be relevant. It's one of the oldest of the modern frameworks that's out there. And while we've had our like ups and downs with like popularity and interest, there's a lot of interest growing right now. And to like still be in this space and still be like super popular at this point is really amazing because we all know how the life cycle is in web technology. It seems like there's a new framework every few weeks. So we still remain like relevant and popular, and people are very interested in it, especially recently with a lot of the changes we've been going through. And we've been really listening to what people have been interested in seeing improved and making those improvements. So that's probably the key thing for me that I think about. And I guess the fact that people really rely on our stability and our backwards compatibility. We've got this whole mindset of like, we take everyone with us when we release new versions. And I know that's fairly unique amongst a lot of technologies out there. And I think that promise that we make to our user base is something that's very strong and remarkable about Angular as a whole.
Definitely. Noemi, what can you tell us about Vue?
Okay. Well, the first thing that in fact was the thing that made me fell in love with Vue is that anyone with development knowledge or programming knowledge can learn and develop interfaces with Vue. For example, I was working mainly with C# and backend languages, and it was a little bit difficult for me to start with another frameworks. But when I found out Vue.js, it was like super fast how I was able to build something, and it was very intuitive. So that's the first thing that I would highlight from Vue. And another thing that I really enjoy is that at that time I was testing with another frameworks, and I saw like something that you need to create a whole application or to add a lot of modules uh, when you use it. And Vue also have this feature that is like it has modules that you can integrate to your project as you need. You don't need to like start from scratch and have like too many things on your project, just the basics. And it was improved now with version 3. So yeah, I think those are the best things from Vue in my point of view.
Great. Ophi, what can you tell us about React? What is the most remarkable feature that you could highlight from your React?
Thanks, Liz. So I'd say that for React, the most remarkable thing is arguably its component-based architecture. We think of it as we think of components as the building blocks, of your application. So more like Lego pieces that each block or component is reusable and it's responsible for a specific piece of functionality. And beyond that, it allows you to easily understand or modify and test your code. And another analogy that I'll give is it's like let's say baking a cake, right? And with pre-made ingredients, you can use those pre-measured ingredients to individually combine and then create a different kind of cake. So I would say that the components structuring in React is arguably the most important feature in React.
And Jessica, I know that you mentioned scalability about as one of the most remarkable features of Angular. In regards of the scalability specifically, can we say apps developed in Angular are then easily scalable? So like that an assumption?
Yes, there's a lot of factors that go into the scalability of any application, from like scalability of like the developer experience that people have, like building out the components. And part of our developer experience there is that we have the CLI that like can very easily generate new components, services, etc., very quickly, and that makes it super easy for people. It includes the testing along with it. We literally generate your unit test for you that will easily run with your whole test suite. But I think some other aspects of it are like dependency injection is something that people are very familiar with in backend environments, and that definitely makes it easier for people to get comfortable with like other patterns they're familiar with. Makes the developer experience faster, and then it also makes rolling out a little easier for people because they can get their tests going pretty well with the dependency injection. It's one of people's favorite features about Angular. And like from the example perspective, like we have Angular running something like 2,000 applications inside Google at huge levels of scale. Famously, if you've ever used Google Cloud, the whole console, developer console for Google Cloud, that's all running on Angular, and that's one of the biggest apps in the world. So like you can see it running at scale in the examples that we have out there. So there's a lot of factors I could probably go into, but and we know there's always room for improvement, but like we've got some great examples of the scalability right there.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing fun fact that Google Cloud runs in Angular. Definitely, that's amazing. Noemi, what can you tell us about Vue in regards of the scalability?
Yeah, so this has to be with my other answer. Scalability is like starting from nothing, like just a script, and then you have a whole application, and then you have a more larger applications, no? For example, I would like to say and admit that if you work with Vue 2, for example, single file components were like the main thing to build a component or a view or something. And if you work with that, you will see that sometimes if you had like a larger application, you have like spaghetti code there. But with Vue 3, you have the opportunity with Composition API, I mean, to improve the scalability of your application and to have like a more clear and separated code uh, in your application. So a fun fact here is like most of the projects that I've been working on with Vue.js are migrations from monolithic repositories to an API and a front end with Vue.js and migrating from other frameworks. So there you can compare like the performance and other things, and we are or at least and the clients are very happy with the performance of the new application with Vue.js, and that's something that can help us to compare directly with 2 or 3 technologies front end.
Makes sense. Ophi, what can you tell us about React?
Okay, so I'd say that when it comes to scalability, React shines because normally its component based design allows it for easy code reuse, and it helps to manage complexity as your code grows. And it's I'd say that mainly because as you build the component, every component is responsible for its own logic and rendering, and it makes it self-contained and reusable. So this would make the code more maintainable and in effect scalable, and because changes to one component doesn't necessarily affect the other components. So I'd like to use an analogy, for easy understanding. So for the scalability, sorry, you can think of it like when you're planning a city. Okay, so in a well-planned city, it's easy to add new buildings, or even an entire neighborhood because the infrastructure is already designed to support that growth. And it's very similar to how React operates because its design allows for that smooth addition of new features and components without necessarily disrupting the existing architecture. Yeah.
Makes sense. All right, so we have similarities and differences, opinions between scalability in in these 3 different frameworks. But what can we tell about performance and runtime? What can we say about apps built in Angular, Jessica?
So an Angular performance and runtime, it really varies. Like with all of these frameworks, you can write really performant code in your components, and you can write like really non-performant code and have your own footguns that you write. Like making a giant component in any of these frameworks is going to affect your performance and how the runtime will be able to communicate with all the rest of the components on the page. So with Angular, we actually have some like shortcomings in that the main bundle size tends to be a bit larger than some of these other frameworks, and that's an area of improvement we're currently working on. But from a pure runtime perspective, Angular does pretty well. We have had a global change detection model, but we also offer on-push change detection, which is more granular. And depending on the type of application or how large the application is, you can choose between those two change detection models with a few caveats of like, if you use on-push, you might run into some unexpected behavior. We're also currently actually looking at our change detection model and how we can update it so that it actually is more performant across the board. So we actually do look to some of the other frameworks for inspiration in that regard too. So we like a lot about what React and Vue does with their change detection models, and we take inspiration from like Svelte, for example, for some of their syntactical stuff. So I guess we're currently making active improvements in all of the areas where we know we have room for improvement. So, but from a overall performance and scalability perspective, like we see pretty good performance in the larger apps, as long as they make the right choices about how to construct their components in ways that don't cause issues with recursive change detection cycles, because that's one of the biggest problems we run into. A lot of issues we also see involve a library. You may be familiar with RxJS, and people will write patterns there that potentially aren't the most performant and end up causing more problems. And we know that's a learning journey that people have. And there's a lot of resources for people to solve those issues, but it's another area we know there's improvement for. Hopefully that answers the question.
Definitely do. Thanks, Jessica. Moving on to Noemi.
Okay, so here I have some resources because I made a talk some time ago comparing React and Vue.js about performance. It was like the main topic there. And for example, if you see, I'm sharing here, but I'm not sure if we can share it with the audience. But here you can have something to play, a website that it's a tool where you can compare front-end frameworks based on real data from applications online on the web right now. So this one, for example, shows you web vitals, first contentful paint and largest contentful paint. And I'm not comparing with any framework, just Vue in this moment. For example, 58% of the pages or applications built with Vue have like good or excellent first contentful paint. Also largest contentful paint. It is hard to explain because you are not seeing the chart, but there you can visit that site and take a look and check each of the frameworks, for example, Angular or React, and have an idea on how they perform in real applications on the web right now. And another resource that I would like to share with you is this one. Let me share here, and hopefully Women Who Code team can help us sharing this. But it is really interesting. For example, in this new site, you can compare frameworks. You select the frameworks that you want to compare in that moment, and it gives you a result. For example, creating rows, how many time it takes to perform this action, or replace all rows, or partial updates. And for example, here we can see the geometric mean of this, and VueJS has 1.26 milliseconds, and Angular this is with the last version. Angular has 1.60 milliseconds, sorry, and React 1.89 milliseconds. So there you can compare, like, not all the items are like Vue is the best, but at the end you have like the mean of all these actions, and you can compare. This is a recommendation, and it is something that also has been improving on Vue, and you can check and compare with version 2 and 3.2, and you will see like there was a lot of improvement there.
Yeah, and as you're saying, it's not that quite significant difference. I believe that in bigger applications, they all have big bundles, but always open to optimization. But let's see what Ophi has to say about React.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So when it comes to performance, I'd say that thanks to the virtual DOM, React's performance is quite impressive. And this is because when changes are made in your application, React creates a new virtual representation of the UI, and then it would compare this new implementation to the previous version, and then it only updates the real DOM with the actual changes. So this is a process that is known as reconciliation. And the real world example that I'll give, since most of us, I believe, are familiar with Instagram, I would say that, so when we take an application like Instagram, you see there are constant changes to the user interface in the form of new posts appearing, the likes, the comments being updated, stories being added, and all. And with the traditional DOM manipulation, these frequent changes would cause significant performance issues. Like it will cause a lag, or it will cause it not to run as fast. And every change, no matter how small, would have required a complete refresh of the entire DOM tree, right? And which is quite expensive, and I'd say time consuming to operate. But because Instagram is built with React, it leverages the power of the virtual DOM to optimize these the UI updates. And so when a user likes a post, for example, React will create a virtual representation of the UI, and then determine if there's the difference between the current UI and then the previous one, and then it would update only based on the changes that it sees. So I'd say that this demonstrates the power of React Virtual DOM, and then the positive impact on application performance. Yeah.
All right. So while Jessica joined, let's get to the next question. I'm very intrigued since the three are very amazing development frameworks. They all are very popular and well accepted by their respective communities. And there are job opportunities in to work with these languages. So I would like to jump in and ask you about the learning curve for these development frameworks. Do you think like it is required to come from a specific background? I know that a common complaint is that some development frameworks have a complex syntax that could block the learning, or stop you from getting familiar to it. But also there is the requirement to learn another development language in order to learn to code in this with this development framework. And I'm going to start with Noemi.
Yes, sure. Well, as mentioned, that's one of my favorite features or highlights of Vue. Um, it doesn't matter if you are backend or front end or DevOps, anything could happen, and it is really easy to learn. Um, this is where I can say that, at least in my point of view, this is the framework that is easier to learn compared with too many others, at least in my experience, because it has, for example, intuitive syntax. Single file components are really easy to understand, and hooks are also really easy to understand and to apply or implement. Um, I tried to understand hooks and React at the beginning, like 5 years ago, and I was like, "Oh my god, what is this? Oh, what does that mean?" But now I'm very familiar. Um, and as mentioned, you can use models and learn models as your application grows up with you and learn, and you don't need like a specific background. And another thing is that when you learn Vue, then you are like very familiar with front end specific things, or words, or I don't know, technical things about front end, and then you can learn another frameworks, and it is really easier for you. So that's why I will recommend to start with Vue.
Amazing. And it sounds like it doesn't matter. Well, you already mentioned that it doesn't matter what background you come from. I would say that it doesn't matter your level of, either if you are in your early career or a little bit more experience. It's very easy to get into Vue.
Exactly.
Jessica, welcome back. We were just talking about the common hurdle of some development frameworks that require some previous background or some previous learning, like a specific development language, or um, yeah, or that have a complex syntax that might block some developers to learn to code. I know that Angular it's written in TypeScript, and that might be a topic. But what can you tell us about this in regards of
Sure.
Angular?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, seeing a system out of memory error while you're in the middle of a live stream is not the thing you want to see. So glad to be back. I also wanted to mention that, Noemi, I love that it was your view, that Vue is the easiest to learn. In my Angular, it is easiest to learn that language doesn't work, but we'll go with it anyway. So Angular has, like on the learning side, we've had some history with maybe some confusing aspects of the learning journey. Namely, people get very confused with what an ng module is. But we've actually now made standalone components, so you don't need a module concept at all. That's a thing, and it has actually greatly simplified the learning journey for Angular as a whole. So you don't have to think about some other concept that manages your dependencies. You can just do it all in the single component. TypeScript is great. I know most other frameworks stick with JavaScript first and then let people add on TypeScript. We felt that TypeScript was the right choice because it gives you type safety right out of the box. There's trade-offs that come with it, because if you don't know TypeScript, that might be a bit of a learning step. It's not a huge step because the syntax is almost exactly like JavaScript. You just have the additional types that you need to learn. So I think that's maybe a minor barrier for some people as they're approaching Angular. The out-of-the-box code generation of being able to use the CLI to like start with a working app real fast it does make it easy to jump in and start learning. I think we know that there's some pain points on our documentation for the like quick start learning journey. That's something that we're putting a bunch of effort into right now. So hopefully we'll have something in the works to be able to like really point people to as like, here's the best way to get started with Angular. I think the biggest challenge that people have when they approach Angular from a learning journey perspective is not Angular. It's really RxJS and understanding the patterns associated with RxJS, understanding the whole observable, subscribing, how all of that works. It can be very, very confusing. We've gotten feedback on that from people over the years that like Angular is great, but when they try to pick up Angular and understand how to deal with RxJS, it's like it can be rather confusing, especially then you go and you start searching for what's the best way to approach how do I write this RxJS in a way that's going to be most performant, and then you get into these weird behavior subjects, and like the code blocks can be very hard to follow. So I think that's the biggest barrier people may have with Angular. But if you just follow the standalone component learning journey, it's actually pretty easy to get started with and run with at that point.
Amazing. And you got a point totally, Jessica, with yeah, don't hesitate in because of the learning curve, with getting familiar with TypeScript. Syntax is pretty similar to JavaScript. So yeah, it definitely facilitates learning curve.
Exactly.
And yeah, in my Angular world too, it's very easier to learn Angular. But super getting into this year to learn another development languages. Ophi, what can you tell us about React? How is it about the learning curve?
Yeah, so since Jessica thanked Naomi for saying Vue was the best, I also like to thank Jessica for saying that Angular was the best. So Team React here. I think that React's learning curve is very smooth, particularly if you are already familiar with JavaScript, because React makes use of the JSX syntax, which basically allows you to write HTML-like code within JavaScript. And for a lot of, I'd say, beginner developers, especially self-taught, where you start from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, moving to React then becomes very easy for you. And using JSX also simplifies the whole development process and makes your code more readable and maintainable. So generally, I know that a lot of people say that React is actually a library because things are not very like, as compared to Angular and Vue, you don't have a lot of things that are more like set in stone. So you would usually have to write up or think up your own logic, which I think it's a good thing, because that kind of freedom, it doesn't limit you. You get to explore, and then you more like there's no limit to what you can achieve in React with that kind of freedom, because you get to think up your own logic. You get to try different scenarios or different ways of achieving the same thing. And in my opinion, that makes you a very good developer, because you don't learn a framework. You don't just learn that, okay, do this after do this. But with React, you understand the problem, and then you think up various ways that you can achieve a solution to that particular thing. So I believe that React is definitely the easiest to learn, and especially for people who are just starting out. Yeah.
Amazing, neat, Ophi, and a lot of people here in the chat is sharing React up. All right, so moving on, we're almost done. I guess that learning is something that will be facilitated by the power of communities. And each development framework has forged an extensive community, but seems like some of them are very widespread. Makes sense if we talk about the level of adoption of certain development frameworks. Um, what can we highlight about the communities in Angular, Jessica?
So like we have a pretty broad community since we've been around for quite a while. There's some like European groups that I know I have spoken at for community. I'm trying to think of the name of the group, and it's like totally like not in my head right now. But there's also groups across the U.S. I know I'm based in Boston. There's Angular Boston here. There's definitely community groups, much like GDG and Women Tech Makers. Also, shout out to them because I used to be an organizer and Women Tech Makers ambassador. And we have our Angular Discord. There's also our Slack. We have a lot of contributors. And also, just quick plug, if you want to be a contributor to Angular, we totally welcome that. So please come and take a look at issues and submit your first pull request. I'd be happy to review it for you. So please do that. So yeah, we just have a pretty broad community across all of the world. We have a pretty big base in the enterprise space. That's where a lot of Angular users are. There's a number of conferences that we show up at, and we're starting to make more broad appearances across just the whole JavaScript framework space, because we love all of the JavaScript frameworks. We actually collaborate a lot across the different frameworks with the different framework teams. So yeah, a lot of opportunity to get connected with our community.
Definitely, and it's a very widespread community, the Angular world. Noemi, what can we tell about you? How can we join a community?
Okay, I think we can mention a disadvantage here because it is a relative like new framework compared with Angular or React. So we don't have like a lot of resources, but the good thing is that community is very friendly, open. Something that I really like is that they all, like the main people in behind Vue, work in different modules and different frameworks, for example Nuxt, and they're really like communicating themselves to work together. For example, Piña also is something for state management that they had been working together. Like you can also participate, but the main people behind this technology is like working all together always, and that makes like more compatibility and more kind of tools that are really how can I say this, like for the community itself, because this is not like from a specific company. Vue is like from the community to the community. This is something great. Yeah, and that's all, I think.
Ophi, what can you tell us about React? Do you think like the community in React is extensive enough?
Yeah, hi. So I'd say that for React, the React ecosystem is quite huge. There are a number of communities. The first community that will actually talk about and encourage people to because there we have a number of Frontend Friday and a lot of other coding sessions where people get to use React to build stuff. So that's the first one. And we also have community on GitHub, which is open web to it. And meetups and conferences of React Europe. There are a lot of local React meetups around, and there are also a number of resources like Overflow, Reddit's React subreddit, and a lot of courses on Ejara, Udemy, Udacity, and all over. So I'd say that these communities collectively, they offer resources and support for React developers of all skill levels. So you don't necessarily have to be an expert to join. And I'd encourage as many people that can join open source projects, where they get to use their React skills on the job, especially for those who are still learning, so that you can build that experience early, and you can also get to practice what you are learning, like the theory that you are learning. And mainly just join Women Who Code Frontend for more experience with React. Yeah, thanks.
Amazing, Ophi. Thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of communities and ways to get into React and, learning, meetups, and connect with people worldwide. And there's a lot of people here in the chat teaming up, lots of lots of opinions. Angular, Team React, Team Vue. But I believe that we don't want to say like we have a winner, because they all are very popular and amazing development frameworks. What I would like to ask for closing, whoever wants to answer this question, is how might we as developers from different backgrounds collaborate together to improve the learning curves in whichever they choose to work on?
I guess I can answer this, or start at least. Don't silo yourself. Like if you need help, reach out and ask for it from people in the community. Like I know if people reach out to me, I'm more than willing to help out in any way I can. And I think mentorship is a key aspect of growing in this community, growing in engineering across the board, and good mentors can make everything in your career move in the right direction. So I think that's a big factor.
Definitely. Love that mentorship that you mentioned.
And everybody can reach out if they would like. I'm happy to be a resource for you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for answering that. I believe that we are overdue with time. It was a very interesting and enlightening panel. Thank you so much for being